Let us pray. Lord, we need to hear from you on this morning. Speak. Your servants are listening. Amen. Now, I don't want you to open a Bible or an application this morning. I would invite you, if you would, just to listen, to assume your best listening posture. So good to see you, Reverend Karima. Your best listening posture. For me, that is with my eyes closed and trying to imagine what is being said from Paul's great letter to the church at Rome, a church that he did not found, a church that he never visited. Romans chapter 8, verses 26 through 28. Hear these words. Meanwhile, the moment we get tired in waiting. Anybody ever been tired in waiting? Meanwhile, the moment we get tired in the waiting, God's Spirit is right alongside helping us along. If we do not know how or what to pray, it does not matter. If we do not know how or what to pray, it does not matter. God does our praying in and for us, making prayer out of our wordless sighs and our aching groans. God knows us far better than we know ourselves. God knows us far better than we know ourselves. God knows our pregnant condition and keeps us present before God. That's why we can be so sure that every detail in our lives of love for God is worked into something good. Meanwhile, the moment we get tired in the waiting, God's Spirit is right alongside helping us along. If we don't know how or what to pray, it doesn't matter. God does our praying in and for us, making prayer out of our wordless sighs, our aching groans. This morning, I want to begin a series of sermons under this heading, Encountering God. Encountering God. And this morning, I want to talk from this subject, an encounter with God, an encounter with God. Y'all, I went home a couple of years ago, and I was talking with my mother, and I'm always aware that we never know when these conversations will come to an end, and so I treasure every last conversation with my mother. We were talking, we were in the family room. Y'all know the family room with the recliners and the sofa, close to the kitchen and close to the fireplace. We were reclining and relaxing. We were talking and laughing with one another. And soon the conversation drifted in the direction of my mother's only granddaughter, the apple of her eye, whom she loves, whom we all love, our very special niece. This beautiful little girl shares something with most of the children that I know and that you know. And that is that children seem to come out of the womb genetically predisposed to tell the raw, uncut, undiluted, unmitigated, straight, no chaser truth. Do I have a witness this morning? And my niece and other children are not interested in telling that truth diplomatically or strategically or even politically. They're not interested in any of that. They just say what they mean, and they mean what they say. Children just say it, Mama, Daddy, I'm hungry. They do not say, pardon me, parental unit. I am experiencing difficulty due to the fact that nourishment has evaded me for quite some time. Children just say, I'm hungry. They don't say to us when we lay their clothing out on the bed, please consider another choice for today's clothing. Your sartorial malfeasance will greatly diminish my social standing among my peers. They just say, Mama, Daddy, I don't want to wear. Oh, yeah. And when they are infants, Sister Ashanti, before they learn how to speak, they just cry until you do what they want you to do. My mother and father were feeding their precious granddaughter one afternoon, and there is, Marty, a brand of cookie that she is quite fond of. I don't remember the brand. I don't do commercials, but for some reason, they did not have for her lunch that afternoon the brand of cookie that she prefers. They had an off-brand. They had the Czech soda equivalent. They had the store-bought cake equivalent of the cookie that she enjoyed. They gave her an off-brand cookie, the store brand. Y'all know the store brand. Not the shiny, nationally marketed product. They served this cookie to my niece, and she spit it out of her mouth. The minute it touched her tongue, and she said, Gramsy and Papa, this ain't so-and-so. I don't like this cookie at all. Again, she was not trained in the Ralph Bunche Kofi Annan School of Diplomacy. But that image has stuck with me, has sat in my spirit, has unearthed great theological wisdom ever since my mother shared that with me, that this young child, this beautiful little girl, could not be fooled by a quote unquote fake cookie. Oh. She could not be fooled by a fake cookie. And with her no job having, no house owning, no car driving little self, she said, I want the real cookie. Children are close to the heart of God because they are close to the truth. We have not yet taught children to compromise their integrity. Did you hear what I said? We have not taught them to tell small lies or to hide from what they have said or what they have done or what they have felt. Children have not yet learned the martial art that all of us have black belts in. And that is the art of deception. We have not yet made them adults who accept off-brand cookies and who serve them to ourselves and to hungry people all around us. We can learn something from my niece and from your children and grandchildren. They can look at a cookie and it can look like what they want. It can have the right proportion, the right color, the right texture, but when you taste it, you know, in the words of that great theologian Alexander O'Neal, it's a fake. Y'all didn't listen to the radio in the 80s, apparently. When she put it in her mouth, her 10,000 taste buds, and the average human has 10,000 taste buds, they said to her, they screamed as the synapses set themselves on fire and traveled through the central nervous system to the brain. This is not the real thing. We have tasted before, and we know that this might look like the right cookie. It might be the same color, the same texture, but it does not taste like the cookie we expect. My niece knew what she wanted when she sat down at her little play school table. And I'm clear that I need to know and you need to know, we need to know together what we want when we come to church. When we sit down in our pews, we need to be clear about what we want and what we came here for. When we come to Metropolitan African Methodist Episcopal Church, we come desiring an encounter with God. This may not be your language. You might not put it this way, but I declare your soul directed you here because you want and I want an encounter with God. We wake up every morning craving fellowship with the divine. Our singing, our prayers, our preaching, our liturgy are not ends unto themselves. It's a problem I have with much preaching. People preach for the sake of preaching. Preach to get people shouting so they can say, I killed him, I tore him up. You ain't do nothing. They sing so they can slay people and knock them out. They pray and tune so they can mess with people's emotion. None of that is an end unto itself. The end of preaching, singing, praying, and liturgy is to escort people by God's Spirit into the presence of the Holy One. That means that what we do in church, when they sang still waters run deep, the Spirit was using them to escort us into God's presence. When they sang that soaring anthem, who is man that you are mindful of us? They were escorting us into God's presence. I need us to understand today the pain in your life, the brokenness in your life, the difficulty in our lives are messengers from God to escort us into God's presence. Our victory, our joy, the blessings of life are not ends unto themselves. You don't have what you have for you. You have it so that you can experience who God is and you can respond to who God is. Came here today to tell you that we have tried too many things, too many people, too many ideas that leave us empty and hungry. We have encountered success and career and notoriety. We have had losses and pains and defeat. But the one consistent thing that can keep us when we do not want to be kept, that can save us when we don't want to be saved, that can heal us when we don't even know that we're sick, that one thing is an encounter with God. So then the teachers of homiletics tell preachers, don't be abstract. Don't be all philosophical and ontological and etymological and epistemological, and don't tell people something they can use. So two questions arise from the text. What does an encounter with God look like? What does an encounter with God taste like? Can I share with you that the church often gives us fake cookies? The church can give us the appearance of a God encounter, but often that encounter is not the real thing. Quiet worship does not necessarily mean you've encountered God. And loud worship does not necessarily mean that we have encountered God. Transformed life means that we have encountered God. Indefatigable spirit means that we have encountered God. Love of neighbor and love of self means that we have encountered God. But too often I have left church and you have left church spitting out what was given to us because we knew it was not the real thing. This was not what you prepared your mouth to taste, and we spit out what we have been served from pulpit and from pew and from choir stand. We put it in our mouths and we say, this is not the bread that will satisfy my spirit, so we leave hungry. We pour it in our glasses and we drink it. We say, this is not the water that will quench my thirst. Paul writes to the people in Rome, the capital of the empire. Paul writes to a people hungry and thirsty for a God encounter, a real encounter with God. Paul writes this, his longest and most theologically sophisticated letter, as the sun begins to set on the ministry of a man who is now not as young as he once was. When he looks at his fingers and the joints, they are gnarled and upturned. When he looks at his feet, his toes are worn from the travel. When he considers his own physical strength, he gets up every day weaker than the day before. The sun is setting on his life and on his ministry, but Paul has not stopped seeking an encounter with God, nor does Paul stop seeking to bring people into that encounter. He had carried the gospel from Jerusalem to Illyricum. He had preached across the Mediterranean. He had written to Galatia and Corinth and Thessalonica. Paul did not found the church at Rome, but Paul had wisdom for the church at Rome. Paul did not found Metropolitan A.M.E. Church, but Paul has wisdom for Metropolitan A.M.E. Church. Paul never visited the church of Rome. Paul never visited Metropolitan, but Paul has a word for us today. He writes, meanwhile, the moment we get tired in the waiting, in waiting for an encounter with God. God's Spirit is right alongside, helping us along. If we do not know how to pray, it does not matter. He does our praying in and for us, making prayer out of our wordless sighs, our aching groans. God knows us better than we know ourselves. God knows our condition. God keeps us present before God. Those who come for an authentic encounter with God must first confess that they are tired. Is anybody who came to church today not to put on your ecclesiastical makeup, but to say, Lord, I'm tired? Anybody come to church to say, Lord, I'm tired. I'm tired of the mess inside of me. I'm tired of the mess I see outside of myself. I'm tired of the political mess. I'm tired of the economic mess. I'm tired of the fact that I am not as close to you as I know that I ought to be, that I'm not responding to the prompting of your Spirit. I'm tired of pretending. I can no longer fake it until I make it. I want a show enough encounter with you. Metropolitan can't make me encounter you. Lamar can't make me encounter you. I need you to help me encounter you. I'm tired of being depressed. I'm tired of turmoil. I, in the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, am just sick and tired of being sick and tired. But those of us who come for an encounter with God know that in the midst of our being tired, listen to me. If you are tired, you have not been abandoned by God, but God is walking alongside you in your state of fatigue and difficulty. When our mothers and fathers saying, I don't feel no ways tired, they ain't saying they ain't never been tired. Because only someone who has been tired can tell you what it feels like to no longer be tired. They sang out of the depths of their soul, we are tired, but we envision a world when we will no longer be tired. And the guarantee is that God did not bring us this far to leave us alone. Is that anybody's witness today? I come too far from where I started. I'm seeking an encounter with God, and I need everybody who is banking on Joel Osteen to be right, everybody who is banking on prosperity preachers to be right, to hear the theological corrective of our ancestors. Nobody told me that the road would be easy. Is anybody here that knows your life has not been easy? Your mother and your father's lives were not easy. Your grandparents' lives were not easy. But the Lord did not bring us this far to leave us alone. Do I have a witness here today? In all of my tiredness, God ain't never left me yet. Those of us seeking to encounter God must know the Lord didn't bring you this far to drop you off. To drop you off at that ugly, dark house, dismal and doubtful, last house on the corner in the cul-de-sac of hopelessness. God did not bring us this far. Then Paul says, those seeking an encounter with God must understand the dynamics of prayer. And let me expand our definition of prayer. I don't just mean clasping our hands and talking to God and praising God and blessing God and asking God for stuff. All that stuff is good in its proper place, but that's not what Paul means. Paul says, if you do not know how to pray, it doesn't matter. And you know, when I read that, my soul shouted, because what I read is, Bill Lamar, you don't know how to pray. You be talking and preaching, but you don't know how to pray. Is anybody here today who will confess you don't know how to pray as you ought? I just opened the door. You better walk on through. Is anybody here today who will confess you don't know how to pray as you ought? Is anybody here that's tried praying? You did that 90-day prayer, stopped at day 47. You got daily breads, you got books of liturgy, you got reading through the Bible in a year, still don't know how to pray. You tried prayer conferences and prayer calls, still don't know how to pray. What prayer is living a life in the presence of God, regardless of the situation. Prayer is not something that we do for God. Prayer is something that God does in and through us. I don't know how to pray. Paul says, I know you don't know how to pray. I've been whipped. I've been shipwrecked. They almost killed me. I still have not yet learned how to pray. But let me tell you what I do know, that God is inside of us, praying in us and for us. Y'all, this set me free, that God is the one inside of me, praying in me and for me and in spite of me. Let me do a test. How many of you have just been minding your own business and something bubbled up in your spirit and you knew it wasn't you? Y'all better help me today. You were moving and doing what you do, working, driving, praying, walking to the metro, and something bubbled up to the surface in you that you knew you did not originate. You knew that what you wanted to say was not what came in your spirit. What you wanted to do was not what came into your spirit. Paul says that the Spirit of God prays in us and for us, making sense out of our sighs and groans. In other words, we don't have words to say what we ought to say to God, but God does not abandon us. God continues to move inside of us. Told you before, when I heard my grandmothers answer the phone and say, They didn't have words, but God knew what they were saying. When they encountered tragedy and difficulty and they said, Lord, not Lord, but Lord, have mercy. God was speaking inside of them. And let me share with us what the great professor of divinity, Sarah Coakley, shared with me and some years ago, 10 or 12 years ago. We were young preachers, shipwrecked on the shores of ministry, thinking about giving up, thinking about going to law school, thinking about going back to get PhDs, thinking about opening businesses, thinking about doing anything but standing up here doing what I'm doing right now. Yes, sir. Trying to get the heck out before we got found out. Trying to deliver ourselves from the pains and the problems of our situation. I know it ain't just preachers who have felt the same way. Have you felt shipwrecked on the shores of your own reality, thinking about giving up, thinking about throwing in the towel, thinking about letting go and giving up before somebody found out? Dr. Coakley said to us, you must learn that to pray, you must sit still in God's presence and hear what God is saying inside of you. And if you will do this, if you will dedicate some time to God, maybe 5 minutes, it will go to 10 minutes, and 10 will go to 30, 30 to 60, sitting in quiet, not saying anything to God, because really you ain't got much to say. You're not wise enough. You're not holy enough. Sit down and listen to what God is saying inside of you. And if you'll sit and listen, I declare you'll have an encounter with God. But hold on, Dr. Coakley. Hold on, everybody who tells me that God will make it right. Hold on, everybody that tells me Jesus paid it all, therefore I don't have to do anything. All of this theology that makes God responsible and delivers us from any responsibility ourselves. I want God to pray inside of me. I want to encounter God, but I figured out I've got some work to do. Can I tell you that when we do this work together, we'll have an encounter with God, because we'll be able to hear what it is that God is saying inside of us. Let me share this and I'm going to sit down. How many of y'all have ever moved before from one city to another city? I've counted my moves. I've moved 8 times. Anybody here move more than 8 times? Stand up if you moved 8 times, 10 times, 12 times. Let's see. I want to see if y'all have moved a whole lot. Let me share with you one of the necessary components of moving. You cannot move from one place to another without first discarding stuff you don't need. Come on now. In order for us to hear what God is doing, many of us, Bill Lamar at the top of the list, we got some trash to take out. We got some clutter to get rid of in our spiritual lives. We got some relationships to get rid of. We got some thought patterns we got to get rid of. Before you can move to the next house, you got to declutter all the mess in your current house. Do I have just 2 witnesses today? And then after you declutter, You got to find your way to the U-Haul place and to get you some boxes and tape those boxes up and take all your stuff of value and put it in boxes so that you can move it to the next place, having gotten rid of those things that are not important and holding on to those things that are necessary. We'll never be able to encounter God like we want to encounter God until we take out the trash. Do I have a witness here today that there's some stuff I got to take out of my life? There's some evil I've got to take out of my life. There's some crazy thinking I got to take out of my life. And there's some stuff I need to pack up. Y'all been in this church for 4 years. If you go to my office downstairs, I got 10 boxes that I have not unpacked. Living like I'm going. I ain't going nowhere. I better unpack those boxes. There's work for me to do right here. I need to unpack some boxes. There's some clutter I need to get rid of. I got to get that stuff out of the way so that I will have room for an encounter with God. If there is no room, there can be no encounter with God. Is anybody here today who came to church to get rid of some stuff so that you can have an authentic encounter with God? Oh, the pure delight of a single hour that before your throne I spend when I kneel and pray, and with thee, O Lord, I commune with friend. Draw me nearer, nearer, blessed Lord, to the cross where thou hast died. Draw me nearer. Sweet hour of prayer. Sweet hour of prayer that calls me from a world of care and bids me at my Father's throne make all my wants and wishes known. In seasons of distress and grief, my soul has often found relief and oft escaped the tempter's snare by thy return. Sweet hour of prayer. Is anybody here today who wants an encounter with God? Go home with your brooms. Go home with your shovels. Pull out your trash bags and get rid of all of the stuff that's keeping God from dwelling in you. Pack up your boxes. Get rid of that which the ancient theologians called adiaphora, those things that are not necessary. And hold on to those things that make for life. Because the abundant life that Jesus promised can't be for anybody whose house is too cluttered to encounter God. Let us all stand. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. This thing is about encountering God. If, like me, you got a hunger for God in the pit of your stomach, just say amen. Amen. Let me put it this way. If you got a hunger that your money can't fix, you got a hunger that your connections can't do nothing, you got a hunger that your sexiness won't impress, that great African theologian from Tagaste in North Africa, the great theologian of grace upon whom the entire system of both Eastern and Western theological houses are built, St. Augustine says, our souls are restless. Anybody here got a restless soul? You got the house, but you still restless. Got the Benjamins, you restless. Got everything you wanted, still restless. Augustine, our brother, says, our souls are restless until they find rest in thee. Rest. Y'all, that thing won't let me sleep. It wakes me up early in the morning. Do I have any witnesses here today? That thing won't leave me alone. It keep messing with me and bothering me. I can't preach my way out of it. I can't talk my way out of it. It won't leave me alone. It's like a gnat, keep on flying. Like a mosquito you can't do nothing with. It is the gadfly of gadfly. But the Lord is offering us the opportunity for rest. The doors of the church are open. Somebody here came not for the music, although it's been beautiful, not for the sermon. The doors of the church are open. Come, clergy. The doors of the church are open. If you came today for an encounter with God, the doors of the church are open. And I want you to know that I am your fellow traveler. An encounter with God. The one who is both transcendent and immanent, an encounter with God. The one who is judge and lover of our souls, an encounter with God. The one who gives rest to the ancestors and rest to the living, an encounter with God. An invitation into the very heart of the mysterium tremendum. Would you come today? Doors of the church are open as the choir sings something appropriate.